I have a few announcements today, and then we have a few guest speakers, which I will introduce after these announcements. The first is that Case Study 1, as you should know, is due this Thursday at 5 p.m. You can use late days on Case Study 1. However, you will be presenting it on Friday to Udi, regardless of whether or not you've turned it in on time. So you have to be ready to present on Friday. There's no late days on that. And the time and location that you present to Udi, you should know because your team signed up for it when you registered your case study team. Okay? And the other main announcement is that you should have contacted your framing partner by now. If you haven't, please contact them immediately. The goal is to set up a meeting between February 3rd and February 8th. And you do not want to delay on this. You want to get their schedule locked down because I'm sure they're busy people and their available times and days are only going to get smaller as you approach that week. And Woody's giving problem session tonight, which is problem session 4 at 4:15 in this room. Who has questions about these announcements? Okay. Well, as you see, we have some guests here today to speak, and David Matheson has graciously offered his time. David spoke in DA1, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time reintroducing him to you all, but I will say that David did his dissertation on framing, and he spent many years engaging clients and engaging in exercises of framing with clients, so suffice it to say he is the professional with the most expertise in framing that we could identify. That's why he's here.
Thank you.
That combined with the fact he was willing to be here. And so David's going to shed some light on the framing process. As we spoke earlier, there's quite a bit of art to it. It's not this normative, rules-based process. So hopefully he will shed some light to you that you can use later when you speak with your framing partners. In addition, we have Udi Chatow here, who Udi works at HP Labs and has worked with David on projects in the past, and David was able to get us this contact. And the framing exercise you're going to give, well, maybe I should let you, at this point, talk about what you're going to do.
Great.
So can we just give these two a hand for coming?
Yeah, especially him. Right? He's not even involved. So I was asked about framing, and I went to lunch with these guys, and they asked me to explain what I know about framing. And I realized that it's not something an engineering student in a way likes to hear, because there isn't a list of instructions. However, there is kind of an objective, and there are many, many tools. And so we thought the best way to do this would be with a fishbowl. So Udi and I are going to be the fish. And I'm basically going to talk with Udi about some situations he faces and try to frame a problem. I don't know if we'll get all the way there in this time, because we're going to do it with lots and lots of interruptions, many of which I'm sure will come from you. So we're going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to stop and maybe analyze the situation a little bit. What am I thinking? How's this going? And give you opportunities to ask also, what do you think's going on in this conversation? And ask me kind of what my tactics are and get his response and so on. So this is the framing fishbowl. I would like to start, though, with some preliminary remarks so you have some idea what I'm trying to do and where I'm going. But I hope all of you are ready to jump in, because this is going to be highly participative. So useful frame. I think of this as really the foundation of decision quality. This can completely and utterly change how you perceive every other dimension in the decision quality diagram. Now, how many of you are familiar with decision quality? Some of you, not all of you. Okay. Ron also uses the term decision basis, which is more or less equivalent. How many are familiar with the decision basis? Okay. So let me do a little bit of background on just this framework. And it says basically, if you're trying to understand whether you're making a good decision, something that would more or less meet our rules or would produce higher probabilities of the prospects you want, you have to look not only at how the evaluation is done, but all the information and everything that comes in to support that process. And so the first one is a useful frame, which I'll talk quite a bit more about in a few moments. But that's basically what is the problem you're trying to solve, loosely speaking. Creative doable alternatives. So it's not enough just to have some alternatives. You really want to think about them. If you have variations of the same thing, you're not really helping anybody with the decision analysis. So what is the range, and have you been sufficiently creative about that? That's what that one's about. Meaningful, reliable information. We're all taught that you can do probabilistic assessments, and it's certainly true, but if you get the probability assessments of people who don't know what they're talking about, it's actually not that useful. And so in an organizational context, most firms are actually pretty good at this, except where it comes to uncertainty, in which case people get quite confused. Next one, clear values and trade-offs. This would be your end measures on the decision tree, what goes at the very end. The issues here in terms of quality have to do with trade-offs and measures for the things people care about. Now, frankly, in a corporate setting, which is what we have here, this is almost never problematic because money. It's all about money, basically. Or if you're in some areas like, say, pharmaceuticals, where safety is really critical, safety is so important that it's a screen. You remove all alternatives that are unsafe, and what's left is money. So on the margin, in business context, it's pretty much always money. In medical decisions, life and death sorts of things, or in complex policy, maybe this is more subtle, but it's rarely an issue in businesses. Correct reasoning. Do the recommendations and outputs follow from the inputs? That also is fairly rarely a problem in businesses because people really do care about getting the best results. I think the worst case I know of this is a case Ron was involved in, involving recommendations around nuclear policy for the U.S. president, in which the executive summary was the opposite of what the main body of the report said, or something more or less like that. So a really egregious case of disconnect. And lastly is commitment to implementation or commitment to action. That is, you need to do whatever it takes so that the people who have to take action do take action. Right? Now, if you're one person, that's a more internal thing. Are you really ready to take action? But in an organization, you actually think about mobilizing people who understand the decision and understand how it's carried out. Any just high-level questions about decision quality? That's like a 1-minute overview. So let me jump into a frame. Anyone have a... Yes, please, Andrew.
How do you gauge a company's commitment to implementation?
How do you gauge a company's commitment to implementation?
I mean, like, you can say to, like, the person that you're interviewing, like,
yeah,
is your company committed to actually doing something about this? And, how would they know?
So the way I know is organizations are driven by powerful people, basically. And there are two things. You need to get coalitions of powerful people behind it. And the second thing is that you need to have the people who are going to take some kind of action, which might be complicated, to actually understand what they're supposed to do. And very often, so you can get many mistakes here, but the CEO makes a pronouncement. We all think of the CEO as the, quote, decision maker. That's not always true. The CEO has a lot of power, for sure, but the CEO may not have the connections to the people who actually take the action to make that argument. So you've really got to trace through who has power, what is it going to take to convince them, and is there enough understanding so that some recommendation can translate into some action which more or less corresponds to that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? It's a great question because power also comes up in framing too. So let me give you some definitions of frames. Here's a very simple one. The frame is the purpose, perspective, and scope of the problem you're going to solve. See, if you're using decision analysis as a consultant, you are intervening in a situation. You will not be there after it's over. You're coming in, you're going to be there for a period of time, and you're going to leave. So what are you trying to do? What perspective or approach do you bring to this? And what is the boundary that you're putting around your problem. So this is a quick definition. Let me give you some examples of this. So here is a picture of a car. That's a Jaguar. Now, when I put this picture up, what comes to mind as a competitor of a Jaguar car? A Porsche. What a Lamborghini. Ferrari. Anybody noticing a pattern? These are all the immediate competitors of Jaguars. So these are cars, right? And if you're a Jaguar and you're trying to think about how to grow your business, you might have a frame around being able to compete against other auto manufacturers. But I'm going to change the perspective here for a moment. Ask yourself the question, who spends money on these kinds of toys? Rich people, discretionary income, right? When they have a choice to spend on a car like this or something else, what are the other choices they consider? What was that? Houses, boats, vacations, airplanes. Okay, so that's a different frame. And that shift of framing is being driven by the shift of perspective. And probably also scope would come along with that, right? Now, if you ask yourself, where is the competition more intense? Among auto manufacturers for auto dollars or among categories for discretionary spending? Turns out you can study that question, and when Jaguar studied it, probably 10 years ago, it's actually more intense among the categories. So what that means is the kind of alternatives you want to think of are things like, let's go promote cars. In fact, let's go to our traditional competitors and sponsor races or other things that generate interest in cars, as opposed to, let's try to cut our prices or deal with the feature wars or other things. So you see the frame shifts everything in this example about what you would consider in the analysis. You guys follow this? So that's the purpose, perspective, and scope of a frame. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I'm going to skip this example. I think we want to be more... okay, so let's get to the useful part of this. What makes a frame useful? And there is a piece of this which engineers love. It's the technical, economic sort of part of this. That is, what can we actually help with? So when you go into an organization setting, and that's really where the bulk of my experience is, so just to be clear, they're facing some kind of conundrum. They're stuck. They don't call in a decision analyst if they're not stuck somehow, somewhere. Okay? And you need to be useful. Be genuinely of service to help them figure out their conundrum. Which may or may not be what they say, but there's sort of a technical definition to this, right? What is going to help you generate a useful... And so here's scope in a project management sense, like a time frame is very important, right? We have to make a decision in 2 months, okay, then you can only do certain kinds of things. And you have to make sure that whatever you propose as the frame, or however you approach the problem, is actually can accomplish some action in that time frame, which means you have to scope it properly and figure out a technical approach and so on. This is only half of the problem. And I think in many ways it's the easier half to deal with. Because I think the essence of good framing is to find electricity. Now this is a much more sort of social, emotional dimension. And it's much more personal. In fact, I think thinking of it personally is a very good proxy even in organizations. That is, they're not here talking to you because they have some abstract problem. They don't actually care about the abstract problem, generally speaking. What they care about is what's inside. How do you find the third rail of motivation? Because you got to find it and you got to grab it. Find that electricity and then work from that to create something that is actually going to move that forward and help channel that electricity. So you're going to go for the high voltage wires. Now, what is this? This is all about addressing something that matters. You can do a great analysis and get a giant yawn. That's not very helpful. So, what do you look for? Passion. Fear. In organizations, you get conflict. So, people are butting heads, or person X wants to do something and person Y wants to do something else, or frustration, and try to find that third rail. So there are many, many tools. And I think practically anything can be used as a framing tool as long as you understand the intention around finding the right purpose, perspective, and so on, and finding electricity and channeling it in a productive way. So I have a laundry list of tools. There's some more technical tools: issue raising, situational assessments, little scouting missions, developing scenarios. There are some listening tools. These are much softer. Asking good questions. SPIN means situation, problem, implications, and needs. So it's a way of querying somebody about what's important to them. Ladder of inference means really understand the actual data upon which someone's conclusions are based. Advocacy and inquiry, you may need to make a statement and then ask what the other person thinks about it. Listening for relatedness, that is on the emotional side, having some kind of connection with the other person is really the foundation upon which you're going to get them to tell you what they care about. And if they don't feel connected to you in some way, they're not going to open up. But I think the simplest stuff is the learn by doing. So decision trees, influence diagrams, strategy tables, work your way around the decision quality spiral, or work your way through the decision basis in outline. Can you sketch the problem in a quick conversation? And that'll probably map out a lot of what you need to do. Any questions or comments so far? I've probably been talking far too long. So let's go. So I'll go back to this. And let me introduce Udi. Udi is he gave a very dry introduction. Udi is a creative genius over at HP Labs, and he is one of these rare people who has a deep technical background, which happens to be in printing, plus a real understanding of business problems and a wild, fabulous imagination. So he connects dots that nobody else sees. And he has been involved in the starting of many new businesses at HP, some of which have succeeded to varying degrees and some of which have not. And that, of course, makes somebody the most interesting when they actually have failure experiences behind them, because then they know what it really takes. So Udi has a situation about how to grow a business. And let's welcome Udi.
Thank you.
So Udi, why don't you start with just some basic background about MagCloud, and then we'll start talking.
Great. So MagCloud was one of the first innovations that I did coming here. My passion was printing. Indigo was my background. Indigo is the high-end printing, digital printing. These are big presses, like $500,000 million presses. HP acquired us, Indigo, 2001. I moved here 2005. And one of the things I wanted to do is go beyond the box, right, the printing box and the inks, and create new services. And the first thing that we created was MagCloud, which I brought a couple of samples here we can actually pass around as I talk. And that is an enabling platform for want-to-be publishers to create their own magazines, their own publications. Now it's more popular with other kind of similar things coming up. If you have a content, you upload it to our website, and we distribute it to the iPads. And if somebody wants to actually get a printed, in a printed format magazine, very simple. The Ford Model T, you can have any color, but it has to be black. That's the way we started. One very simple workflow. And now people can do, their magazines, their photo-rich experiences, their promotions for their small businesses. We launched this 2 years after the ideation of this, 2007, as a private beta. Went out after a year to a full, and we're adding features. This is live. If you go, anybody wants to go later to maccloud.com, you can see. So that's the background.
Yeah.
That's where we started.
Just to add a little bit to that, just so you get a better sense of it. So these magazines are high-quality professional magazines, and the key thing about them is they can be printed in small quantities, like units of 1. And that enables, if you want to publish something and you have a very small interest group, you can create something, publish it, you can give it to your friends, you can buy a bunch of them, you can sell them, they'll handle the ordering around this, so you can get subscribers or followers who can buy them one at a time off there. So this is breakthrough, because most printing of this quality is done in runs of measured in thousands or tens of thousands of units.
The break even for this is like around the 2,000, 5,000. Anything under is actually worthwhile. And as David said, the great advantage is you can actually personalize it or do proof of one, and then decide you want another one, or have people order one by ones actually, and it's the same price of ordering as 1,000. Because it's a digital, just like a laser printer, much bigger with this kind of quality.
Great. Any questions about just general background here? All right, so Udi, you told me you were trying to grow this, so tell us a little bit about the situation.
So we're 3 years down the road. We're roughly $10 million small business. For a big company like HP, we need to at least cross the $100 million kind of interest. That's where it becomes interesting. So we're in an early incubation stage, still protected, still growing nicely, but we actually have a budget, a committed budget of $1 million per year, which is a very small startup kind of budget, as we are, a startup within the big company. And we want to make the best of this budget and grow. Actually, our calculate to get to 100 million, we need to grow like 3 times year over year to make it roughly to that, minimum level of where we can stay alive, or else we die. So that's the.
Great. And where are you today?
So we are roughly at a run rate of $10 million revenue, which is nice from zero, to get there. But it's not enough to be. So maybe some small startups will say, we can. From that, for us, we to survive, we need to grow.
Okay. So let me pause you there. What has he told us about his frame so far? What's at stake for him personally in this decision? Let me start with the hard ones. What is at stake for him personally in this decision? Yeah, Andrew?
His ability to explore this startup idea.
His ability to explore the startup idea. Good. Other ideas? What else have people seen? Yeah, Chris?
It's probably a lot of personal credibility tied into how successful the company is.
Yes, indeed. Yeah?
I imagine you have people that work for you on this project, and there's probably some personal loyalty you have to these people. And they probably work on it because they like working on it, so you want to see them succeed just like you want to see the project succeed.
And they work hard. Yeah.
Okay, so if you can find out what's at stake for somebody, that tells you a lot about where the third rail is going to be. And he was very kind. He put it on the table right away. Now, you have to read between the lines, right? He founded this business. It's the first one he did. He's trying to get credibility. It's had some success, but not enough success. How do you think he feels about this business? I'm sorry. Is he proud of what he's done, or is he disappointed about what he's done so far? Proud, right? So what's his frustration then? Is the 100 million a reasonable objective?
Pretty high bar.
He gave us some signals, right? What did he try to tell us about that 100 million? Now, I'm guessing, actually. I mean, we could ask him. He'll, I'm sure, jump in at some appropriate point if I get too far astray. But he told us some other things about that 100 million, right? One, to be HP worthy, that's what he has to hit. Right? So this is a fairly big deal, and you guys touched on it before. And then he said, we have to show progress. right? And he threw out, I think he threw out the figure of having to double or triple every year. What was the number? I forgot what the number you said was. Right? So he actually gave us a trajectory. So we know a lot about how he sees the problem and what is at stake for him. And we also know something about some constraints he has. What are those? $1 million budget. Now, do you think that that's firm or soft?
Sounds pretty firm.
Okay. I don't know whether it's firm or soft myself. But when people give you constraints, you have to take them very seriously, and you need to understand them. Because here's the thing. That's part of his frame for the problem, and we may need to help him find a better one. So you got to be clear about what he thinks and have hypotheses about other things you need to probe and explore. So have I told any lies here, Udi, or am I? So far, so good. Okay, so what might be a line of discussion that we might want to pursue at this point?
How does he think he's going to grow it?
2-3 times a year. Like, what projects does he have in the
What are his current thoughts, right? That would be a great one. Any other ideas?
How they make money right now, or sort of what's the landscape look like right now?
Right. Okay. So these are both sort of situation questions, right? They tell us more about his thinking, and those are really, really good. We can stay here because he's already given us a lot of implications. Remember the spin idea? He's already told us a lot of implications, and he's actually started with what he cares about. That's the need part. What is the benefit of this? Because that's what's at stake stuff. So it's great when you have that to start with. So let's go down that question. So tell me, what are your thoughts about your $1 million?
The flexibility of the $1 million?
Well,
what are we going to do?
I'm going with a version of this question.
So
right?
maybe
what are the things you've
I'll try to
been
answer
thinking
the
about?
two questions.
Yeah.
So we have two different kind of segmentations in the market today. One would be consumers. What we thought initially would, a lot of people want to publish their stuff, have it, available on their iPads. It's kind of a multimedia, and let's just have, spend $1 million on marketing and get more awareness. That's one option. The other segment is the people who are using it as a business promotion tool. They have a small business, and they say, hey, I never, the cost of this, I didn't mention before, is 15 cents a page. You want to do a 4-page brochure, 60 cents. You can't find anything that price for that price for small volumes. Of course, if you go for thousands and thousands. So why not use this as a business promotion tool? And we're seeing more and more of our growth, actually more than 50% of our growth, was from small businesses who said, hey, this is the way I can get to my customers. This is the way I can order 50 of these and put it, at my conference or at the shows, or send it as a direct mail piece to my valuable customers so that they know what's kind of a mini catalog, as you can see some of the examples which are going around. So those are the two segments, and we're the internal thoughts or debates that we have is how much to put on marketing, how much to put on geographical. And maybe another point is today we're US, Canada, and UK. That's what we've expanded. We started US, we added English speaking, Australia not yet, others not yet. We have a lot of people asking, why can't we have this service somewhere else in the world? But every one of those expansions is probably half our budget if we go and enable, the worldwide expansion. That too we can do in different ways. Franchise it. So the two segments, consumer and small businesses. We can add features, give them more, quality features, create more awareness, marketing dollars, sponsor things, and geographical expansion. Those were kind of the mix of the three things. We know that we can't do everything, with the budget, limited budget.
That's great. So, yeah, Ron.
Yeah, just a clarification. What exactly is the service? In other words, if I see this and I say, I got a business, but I don't know how to get all these images and layouts. How do I get from not being able to do it to sending this to my customers for 15 cents a page?
So we do not help with the design. You have to know or create a PDF or use our partners. We do have partners that...
So you have to know what you want to print
Exactly.
in order to use this.
Yes. So that is the first big barrier. But there are partners and there are, design houses and others who have that.
So then the relationship to your partners and the co-branding, all that kind of stuff is an issue.
Yeah, as an example, I'm on the board of a company called PhotoZini, which is built off of MagCloud, and they do the service. You send them photos, and they do the layouts for photo magazines, right? And there are, I think, several such companies.
It's an excellent point, by the way. That is probably one of the barriers. Most of the people who are not talented, like myself, don't know how to actually create it. So my wife has to create the nice.
Have you thought about spending on partners? It's a way of accelerating this?
No, that wasn't in the. Maybe as a promotional tool, but not as a. No, that's definitely an option to put down.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you, why did you ask that question, Ron? Because that probed the edge of his thinking. Did you see that? Did you see the little...
But I should shut up, right?
Well, no, it's fine. Right? He found a spot, asked a fairly straightforward question that revealed something about the edge of his frame and what he had thought about. You see how that happened? So that is often something you do, and the way he did it is actually good. You can assert them sometimes, but it just flowed naturally out of the conversation, right? You don't want to drive it too hard, but you might need to drive a little. So what has he told us so far? Let's review here quickly. I wrote a list of, just because he was saying a lot, I just put a list of stuff on there. What are these things? Do they have any relation to decision quality? What is he telling us? Yes, Chris.
I feel like we've got some kind of loosely defined alternatives for what he could do with his budget.
Okay. And those are to invest in the different areas?
Yeah.
Okay, so these could be viewed as some dimensions of alternatives. Yep. Anything else they could be viewed as? So he defined these two as market segments. What did he tell us about the market segments? But the alternative is to invest in the segment, which we can get clear on what that really is. But he told us some things about these segments. Yeah?
Small business is bigger and growing.
Right. That's bigger and growing. So in that statement, what does he tell us about his values and about maybe where we should focus our attention? So I think bigger and growing were not merely descriptions. I mean, they were certainly descriptions of the segments, but they were also statements of his aspirations. Right? So I'm jumping around, so that's okay. So you've got to key in on some of those things. Geography was sort of an afterthought. Okay, now let's think about this for a minute. He's got a web-based service that's operating in 3 countries, which represent a tiny fraction of the global economy. Well, maybe, I guess you got the US, so it's maybe 30% roughly, right? So I'm going, wow, if it works here, why not Europe? It's a web-based system. Now, I'm making a bunch of assumptions about whether it can work there or not, but this for him was an afterthought. So that's an example of some like background thinking I'm doing that might go, I could ask some questions about that, it might go sort of the way Ron went, right? Where he asked some questions and then boom, there's some new options on the table, right? Or it changes the frame in some way. But I want to go with his passion, certainly at the beginning, and I'm pretty ignorant about those segments. And I think they're pretty important. Right? If I'm going to be useful to him... Oh, he's also told me one more thing. What has he told us about his colleagues?
They're passionate, they work hard.
They're passionate and they work hard. And he's told us something else. So I read between the lines maybe a little, but I think he has people who are championing this, and there are people who are championing this, and he can't please them all. Did any of you guys pick up that? I mean, that's a hypothesis. I don't know that it's true.
He reads between the lines.
But he said he had people working on both of them. He said his budget was $1 million. He said each of these takes at least half the budget. Right? Put the pieces together. So hypothesis, an area for exploration. Now remember, one of the pieces of electricity, there's the personal part of it, which is passion. I think he put on the table right away. But in an organization, conflict and differences of opinion are usually a source of electricity that have to be addressed and dealt with. So I'm thinking there are two lines of questioning here I would probably pursue. One is to find out just more about the segments, and the other is to find out more about the people. And I'll probably start with the segments because I just need the lay of the land here. I can't understand the politics until I understand what those people care about. Right? So that's the way I'm going to try going. Udi, you have these two segments. Tell me a little bit about how big they are, where they're growing, who your customers are, what you got going in these things.
Okay. So the growth, when we look at growth, it's not only the number of users, but how many have they succeeded in selling. You know, HP, the conservative model, is number of pages printed. Because the way we do this is we connect the dots in this case. We have print service providers, which we sell them the big presses. They purchase from us all the ink. And we give them cloud service, right? So we come back as their customer and say, we have this new service. Do you want to print for our joint customers? And they provide. So we give them the order coming through the cloud, right, which is the PDF, sent to them with a shipping order, you know, do these 100 copies of magazines and ship it to one address or 100 addresses. So we bring them we give them the software, and they don't have to do marketing or anything. They just need to fulfill the order. That's a piece of the data which is missing. Now, for HP, what's important is how many of those presses can we sell? How many of these pages can we produce, because we sell more ink and we have, you know, as you can imagine, high margins on the ink. And then what we should be looking, our metric is how many pages are we, not only the revenue of the service which MacCloud receives, but how many pages have we created through this. So this is important because businesses don't usually order one at a time, but they are bigger orders. So when they do a 20-page brochure or catalog, they send it out to 300 people. So one user, 300 people, from our level of customer support and training and things like that, it's one person versus 300 people who are ordering one. So we're seeing with less marketing efforts, which is practically zero, it's word of mouth, we're seeing these small businesses grow in the number of users and also in the volume, because they're seeing that this is very receptive from their customers. It's a good, you know, marketing tool for them.
How many dollars are going through this channel right now?
Are coming in?
Yeah.
Or
just how many pages? You said pages. I mean,
right.
Just
so we have roughly, let's say, 50 million pages this year coming from small businesses, and it'll be 30 million or so from the consumer.
You said they're growing at different rates?
Right. This was the initial, this is where we started off with, and so we had this growth is maybe twice year over year, and here we have more than 3 times year over year.
Okay, so let's unpack that briefly. What was conveyed in what he said?
Some efficiency in these small businesses they don't get with consumer.
And what is that efficiency?
They're closer to the break-even point where they still want to use their service, but they're buying more pages than if I did it and ordered one for my friend. They'd have to spend a lot on me, and I wouldn't give them much money.
Right. So one order produces lots more magazines, right? So, I don't know, let's call that leverage. Bigger orders. Okay? Now, he told us a couple other things. Yeah?
And his marketing budget is currently zero.
Okay, right? So this $1 million is a change in history, right? The trajectory of history. And why do we care about history? Yeah?
I think you mentioned that you started off with consumers, which makes me think that and out of those different parties who may have different opinions, the people who have seen where you started, like consumers, and maybe the new direction that you're most excited about is the small businesses.
Right, right. So what this adds up to, this is sort of in the back of my mind, things to think about. He hasn't said this explicitly, but when you're talking about a change from history, people develop their identities, and that the electricity comes from their experience of history and their relationship to history. And so anything that has change, particularly big, is often an area of fear for people. It's also an area of opportunity for people. Now, I happen to know Udi quite well. He is thrilled by change and excitement, and he'll go leaping ahead. And that's one of the things that makes him a great genius at HP. Not everybody's that way, right? And so, a couple scenarios. If they started here and they're moving here, is the moving to this going to make these people feel diminished? I don't know. It might. Or they might be excited. I mean, they could feel thrilled that they're getting traction and moving forward, or they could be terrified of moving to this new area because it somehow invalidates what they did in the past or something like that. Now, I made all that up, but they're just little things about the passion and the electricity. Another thing I did here, and also this is a good contrast to, I want to be really clear about what I make up and what is actually gone. Now, I asked him basically a single question during his little spiel there, and that was, give me the specifics. And this is a very important tool, and I wrote it down here, 30 million pages 2x, 50 million pages 3x. So he told us a lot about his theory about how the business worked. In fact, I started to sketch it out over here, right? He told us some structural things that were just background information, right? So we have partners, we have retailers, they go to the website, we go to the print service providers, they sell pages, we make money off ink, demand for indigo printers, and we have happy printer customers because they're getting our pages, right? So he's told me a lot about the background of the business. He's also told me a lot about how he thinks he makes money. Now, that's actually a theory. It's probably a great theory. But whenever you see people describing theories, that's a fairly abstract thing. You want to move down in evidence. It says the tangibility is what you can actually connect to and will connect different people. See, he may have somebody else who has a different theory about how they should make money, but they'll probably agree with this. So I don't know if he does have people with different theories or not, but it's important to have the specifics as part of your discussion, particularly around things that might have a lot of electricity around them, right? So I have a hypothesis that there could be some electricity around this division and the alternatives here, so I want to get enough specifics that I don't get lost in the higher level argument. This is a little abstract. You guys follow what I'm saying? No?
What vocabulary did he use that made you identify it as theory versus specifics? Like, what were any keywords that he said that made you feel?
I don't know if I keyed off any keywords. He was describing a system, and he was using, so we get paid for a number of pages. We want to keep our partners happy. These are both objectives, and they're also kind of a mental model, right? And so that just cued me to get some specific. I'm not sure I have the right specifics yet, actually, because I didn't ask him. There are a lot of specifics over here, right? How many pages, how much money do you make, how many printing service, all kinds of stuff I might need to map out there to bring that to ground. And I probably need to do that. I mean, there are so many ways you can take these conversations. You've got to be aware of what the choices are. Yes?
I'm curious, this is another question, so we don't have to go. I'm just shedding my thinking, too.
Yes, please.
It sounds like there's a lot of value to HP in terms of the ink sales and the printer sales, and even just recruiting print customers, because you have this ability to sort of variably, offset if they have any slack in their printing. So I'm wondering how that, credited is the wrong word, but how that gets reflected back, because it's not just the number of pages you're printing, it's the fact that you might recruit a boatload of people who otherwise weren't interested in buying HP products.
Yeah, especially in HP where it's multiple organizations which benefit, and that's where it becomes complex. So there's the presses and consumables, and then there's our new services, which are totally different P&Ls. And so this new small incubation has multiple revenue streams, contributing to multiple revenue streams. Yes?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, right? So you're essentially probing some of this stuff over here, right? Which is great. It's a very good line of inquiry. Did you notice his response to the question? He's been waiting until I asked him a question. He jumped in, right? Well, so you're getting to something that matters to him. I can tell from his body language that there's an itch that needs to be scratched somewhere around this. And so you need to decide whether you want to pursue that, right? And that would be great. Now I think he actually told us a lot about the itch. What did he say?
There's two different divisions with two different profit and loss statements, and this service forms sort of a bridge between the two and allows them both to make money, yet you're probably only getting credited for one of them, or through one P&L statement.
So that's a great guess. I don't know if that's true or not.
We're trying to show our contribution both so we can get more budgets, actually, from both.
So this is about how success is measured.
It's about how success is measured, right? Right?
Which is very important.
It's very important to the problem, right? It's also a point of frustration for him, right? Two P&L/divisions. This sort of thing, now you might know, but when you see this sort of thing, this is usually a source of a lot of pain and frustration, because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in many, many companies.
It's called the curse of large companies.
Yeah, curse of large companies. So he's probably feeling ground up between the gears, actually. He's got this great success. He can't get credit for it. He also told us he needs to get funding from these people. So he's got to make them happy. That's where the $1 million actually comes from. Right? And he's got a new model. Now, how do people in traditional businesses respond to new models? Are they enthusiastically supportive? Right? So there's more about the context there. Now, I think we can go a couple directions here. I think there's a lot of loose ends here. And we're going at like a micro pace, right? Because I'm trying to expose all this. But I think there's one sort of background piece we need. And so I'd like to turn there. I appreciate these. There's a lot of loose ends. And then let's see if we can sort of fold this into some kind of conclusion, hopefully. I'm not going to guarantee we're going to get to a conclusion, but we'll try. So the big piece I don't have here is the people. Right? I understand some of the segments. I understand some of his options. I understand sort of how he thinks about it. I understand some of the dilemmas he's facing. I know nothing about who's involved, who cares, who's working on this. So that kind of needs to be in the background of understanding. This is in a way part of the conversation for relatedness, right? Just what's going on, what's his relation to it, how do I feel about it, how does he feel about it, are we connected, am I covering all the areas, and so on. So let me just start that. So Udi, you mentioned you had passionate people working on this stuff, and you've told me about these divisions and so on. Who's involved? I mean, who's working on this? Who has to decide? What do you need to get approval of those budgets?
All right.
Oh, just for one more thing. Notice, by the way, I connected my question to people to things he cared about, right? So I connect the dots for him as I went, which is probably generally a good thing to do. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Good. So this is a good question. We have two organizations. One is the core organization or the core team, which sits under the Chief Technology Officer and labs, that's where we kind of incubated it. So we have a core team there. And then we have an extended team, which is doing, let's call it biz dev, a little bit of customer support, things like, which is coming from the division actually because they're supportive, because they see tens of millions of pages, which is valuable for them for the additional presses, and so this is coming from the IPG division organization. So we have two different groups. They're
by the way, IPG is the Imaging and Printing Group, which is the group that controls Indigo and does all the home printers and everything. Just some vocabulary there. Sorry, Karen.
So we have these two groups working together. They have an internal manager, and so they're reporting dotted line into us. This team is working with me very closely, passionate, hardworking. They're working in some cases remotely, but they believe in the growth opportunity, and especially lately in the business aspect of it, where small efforts are bringing back high volumes and actually new presses being sold to our PSPs, the printers who are printing for MatCloud. So those are, there's actually a small core team here, an extended team, roughly the same size. I can say there's roughly 4 or 5 people on each of these teams, and that's how we operate today.
Great. And the two divisions are Labs and IPG?
Labs and IPG.
Okay, and who do you need to, if you imagine yourself presenting to somebody or convincing somebody about how you're going to spend the money, who has to be convinced?
Right, and so we, since we're getting the budget, which is roughly split half and half between the two, we are actually asking from both of our sponsors for this to increase the budget so we can grow faster to reach the milestone. And so we actually have to do a dual sell here. We have to go up here to the owner, vice president level, and here to the chief technologist and the lead of HP Labs, who together kind of point in. So it's actually 3. It's here. It's even there's an additional division of 2 different people here are actually jointly putting this kind of small budget for incubation. You'd think, what's $1 million? But these days are for $1 million counts.
Great.
It's kind of interesting. The actual money goes to the printing division. That's where the customer dollars are ultimately going to end up.
Yes. Yeah.
And the labs guy is probably always asking for more money to do more research, and he's got the same problem you got.
Right. So we're paying the printers X, and we're getting Y from the consumer. So when it's 15 cents, let's say we pay 10 cents for the printing itself, they pay 5 cents for, let's say, the printers themselves. They pay 5 cents for the machine and the ink, and so they get a margin. When we pay them the 10 cents, we said it's very non-expensive, right? 15 cents a page, 60 cents but we get a 5 cents margin, which is much higher than the margin on the consumables in the machine as the service, because of the service that we provided. So there's
big multiplier.
There's big multipliers there, and everybody's happy.
Okay, let's unpack a few things that he told us. Right there at the end, he got more specific about the business model and money flow. So I wrote that down. That's pretty important. We're getting a much better sense of scale and scope and so on. But he did spend most of the time telling us about the people, and I learned a couple really critical things from that. Ron picked up on something, is that there's a fundamental disconnect here, which is actually reflected in his business, right? So some of his constraints are sort of real, but some of his constraints actually aren't constraints. Did you guys pick that up? How serious is the $1 million budget? What's your thought?
The way I'm looking at it is because the budget is set by people who are running the team. So if you can convince them about the growth, I mean, you don't need to go anywhere else to convince it's someone internal in these two structures. So it seems a lot easier than it would be if it was someone who's disconnected completely from the project.
Right.
So it's not. It's.
He told us. You have a comment? No. Okay. So one of the things I picked up was that the budget hasn't been set. What he told us is he's trying to get the money half and half from the two divisions, and it's going to be on his ability to convince them that this is a good investment. Okay? So that tells me a couple things. One is, how can I be useful to him? Very tactically and practically, I can be useful to him if I can help him make that argument. Right? So I'm not doing a decision analysis in the abstract. I'm going to be helpful to him, and I've also checked this out from just other things I know, and to his team, if I can help him make that argument. Okay, so that's a big, wait a minute. This is a project that I could hook into with time and deliverables and all kinds of things that would be very beneficial. I've already established there's a lot of electricity here, but now I've got something I could actually work on. Anyone else pick up anything from this? So let's get the time frame, since I'm starting to think, here's a project I can hook into that really connects with something he's doing. When are you going to decide?
So we work on half-year budgets. There's a 3-year budget plan, and then every half year we get the go-ahead. So what I didn't mention, which is important, I think, is that a lot of this budget is going to external contractors like software developers. Every time we have a feature set, we send it out. And so we have the $1 million a year is what we have from the last half year. And we're trying to make the point that, hey, if we got another X, we could do even more and grow, get closer to that target.
Okay. And what's the date? What's the timeline you have to do all this?
So the next round is August. We have August 1st. That's when the next round is. That's where we bring it up to the VPs. They come back with an answer, and we got another.
And do you have other points of contact between them along the way, or is that like a big event?
So we have monthly reviews to kind of show that we're continuing to grow with plans. That is kind of the big event where we need to actually get the 2013 budget in place.
Okay, so monthly events. And when do you start presenting this? When do you actually have it? There's a formal presentation here, but when do you actually really start interacting with them and building their?
Probably 3 months before that.
3 months before that. Okay, so when is that?
I would say
May,
May. Yeah.
Okay, so I know he's going to reach these people, which are going to release the budget May-ish. So I'm thinking I got to have a draft by May, because that's going to be the base. I don't have to have it done by May, because that's the August 1st date. But he's going to start those conversations. So if I want to engage these people or prepare the way, this is a bit back to your question about commitment to action, right? What are the coalitions of the powerful people here? Well, he's got this chain. He's got those people. They're actually different coalitions. I don't think they're not intrinsically cooperative. Right? They're because of this divisional group. So I got to get two people going, and I presume, although I don't know, that there's the core team itself and its relationship to some of these key is probably also a powerful coalition, right? If they don't want to do something, it's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter what the VPs say, right? They've got to be excited and passionate. So I'm thinking there are sort of 3 groups we have to work with here, possibly 4, depending on how aligned these guys are. I expect that these guys are probably more aligned than those guys because they're actually working together. I also expect that these guys are facing they're getting a lot of mixed messages, so these guys are probably getting pulled out and they're frustrated, perhaps. I don't know if it's true that they can't put enough time into this or they're not sure of their priorities and those kind of things.
Yeah, they're not all 100% dedicated versus the core team, which is.
Okay, so I've got a reasonable background on this problem, at least enough, I think, to kind of move this forward. There's a lot more to discuss here, but I'm sort of ready to get started. So I would probably frame this problem as, I've already said this, helping him get budget. Now, implicit in that, if I'm going to be credible at doing that, I also have to, and I haven't checked this out with him, but I also have to have the possibility that my recommendation will mean he shouldn't get budget. And if that possibility is not in there, I'm not going to have credibility. See, I'm an outsider in this organization, right? So if these guys think that I'm just, doing whatever he wants, it actually doesn't help him. So I've got to maintain some objective distance. And in a framing conversation, I'd probably actually discuss that with him about options. And maybe I'll work it in. But how to help him get budget and where to spend it to drive growth. So that might be that's a long-winded title of my project. And I want to get a draft by 1st of, what did we say, April, May? 1 May, right? Okay, so there's a kind of project scope. Now let's do that might be a preliminary frame. Let's do a quick run around decision quality. What are some options that we might have in here? Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, the way I look at it, these are 2 completely separate topics, right? One is helping him get the budget, and then how he should spend it. I mean, they're 2 completely separate decisions that need to be analyzed. Why are you clumping them together?
That's a great question. I could actually frame this either way, right? And this is a good example of frames can narrow and they can expand. And you've got to find a useful level. So if you go too big, you end up doing what people sometimes call boiling the ocean. It's so big you can't make any real progress. And you get too narrow, and it doesn't matter very much. So why have I put these 2 together? I don't know that it's the right answer, and I would probably do a lot more discussion with him to really settle on it, but I'm trying to get to some kind of conclusion in 10 minutes. But here's my thinking. He has to make an argument. It's driven by growth. And he told us at the very beginning he doesn't know where to spend it. So the form of argument is going to have to be, a strong form of argument to those bosses is going to be, we looked at not spending money in A, spending money in B, spending money in C. I want those guys to go, wow, these guys have really been thorough. They've thought of everything, including the stuff that's not actually in their interest. That's what gives you kind of a credibility, right? And then you go from there. Which one gives the most growth? So we're going to position this as a search for how to find the most growth, right? And so that's why I brought them together. I'm not sure it's right. I mean, this is definitely, I don't know, it's sort of an inspired act or an artistic act or something. You have to figure out what you think is useful in negotiation with them, right? So he knows the problem better than I do, but I know the tools better than he does, right? So we've got to come to some reasonable agreement there. So how does this one sound to you? I mean,
that's what I need. I need to persuade him for more money.
Okay, so he just went like this, right? Why did he do that so readily? You could also see from his body language that he was pretty excited about this idea, right? Why did he do that? It's the electricity. The electricity is what is connected, right? So he, and hopefully, right? He started with a problem that was sort of a bit ambiguous, a conundrum, right? We connected it to electricity, and I am showing him a path. I'm now an instrument of dealing with his third rail, right? That's something everybody's excited about. Is that right, Udi? Okay. All right, so what are some alternatives that might be in this? So we're going to just try a rough sketch of decision quality as a way of framing it. What are some of the alternatives we might look at here? He's already told us a couple. Yep.
Marketing budget.
Okay, so marketing budget. Level, what else? Geographic. Okay.
Add new features.
Features, right?
Focus more exclusively on small businesses.
So let's call that segment. And the one I'm going to put in there is exit or salvage. And I'd probably argue with him that we need some kind of salvage alternative on there, or he's not going to be credible in that presentation. Yep.
You know, Dave, the one thing we haven't hit here, because this sounds great, is, you know, I get, if I'm sitting on the board listening to this,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I'm saying, you know, it's beautiful. It's really magnificent. I get about 10 of these a day in the mail, and usually I throw them out.
Yeah.
In other words, this is a print story, more trees and all that. When I'm looking at giant TVs in my phone and all this, I mean, this is, you know, this horse and buggy in the days of cars. What's going on here?
He's got some more electricity there, right?
Not to mention competition, right?
Yeah.
You know, Canon and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So there's really big questions that I know you're aware of.
Can we have coffee later?
So you've got to be aware of that if you're going to make a presentation.
Absolutely, right? So I think Ron has done two things relative to this. He's building the weight to look at this seriously. And he's also guessing that those people have those concerns, right? So it's much better to just get ahead and be open with it than hide it. A lot of people try to hide the negative. One of the great powers of decision analysis is that you can look at multiple scenarios. You can try negative scenarios and positive ones, and you don't actually have to commit to it because you've got multiple scenarios. Most people in businesses are used to committing to particular scenarios, and that's a great power we have. He's done that, so he's put some weight behind that. He has also suggested a completely different frame. Now, he hasn't really specified it, but there is a much larger scope frame kicking around here, around the relationship to print and the vitality of print. Now, is that going to be a useful frame for Udi? I suppose, yeah. So I think probably not, right? Now I'm reading between the lines. Udi needs to be aware of this, but this whole division is committed to print. And it's huge, right? And so if I wanted to pursue this, there may well be a bigger problem here, and I may well want to do this. I don't know. Actually, I probably wouldn't in his situation, but you may be in a situation where you need to say, all right, this is a teeny little pimple on a much bigger problem. Let's go talk to the people who own the big problem, because that's how we're going to come to an understanding of this.
Or you could attach your wagon to their train, because they probably made promises about printing is going to explode no matter what.
Exactly.
And we're going to help you do that.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think in this instance, and certainly for the class, I probably wouldn't, we won't explore it for the class, and I'm not sure I'd explore it very much with Udi, because just for given this structure, this is probably a pretty hard constraint for him to question the basis of printing, right? These are some alternatives. I could explore these alternatives more. I would be asking him questions like, which ones are the most important to him? Which ones do people care about? I mean, I could continue a framing conversation. If you had to pick three, which ones give you the most interesting variation would be a kind of question you could ask, right? Because you can come with a very long list, but ask him which three are the most different. Will give you a sense of the scale, right? You're testing. The sketch is a test. It's not trying to be comprehensive. It's like, well, how about there? How about there, right? So that would be some things I might do there. Information. I have some mental models. I actually don't have a whole lot of information. I've just got some basics, right? Now, do I believe that he can produce it in my time frame? He seems to be in command of his facts, right? He's not saying there are huge gaps. There may well be information, but I didn't hear anything in this conversation that would lead me to believe he can't find the people who can provide good information for me. So I would just skip that one in this instance. Sometimes people say things like, well, we just don't know what's going on. Okay, that's an information problem. Values. So I know this is going to be measured in money because it's a business. But I know that there are some important pieces of that, and I suppose you could put this in information or values, but I know that pages are important, and I know that ink is important. And so if I were to draw an influence diagram here, I'd probably treat the value metric as a single value metric, but I'd think a little bit about what those first set of things were that are really going to drive the money. And he's told us a lot about that, so they might fall in between here. Values, what's next? Logic. Okay, I'm not sure I have much to say about this in this case. I can imagine a model. I can imagine some scenarios for growth in different areas, for the effective features. I can imagine a model. So I'm pretty confident I can get there. Now, I haven't said much about it. I don't know if you guys can you guys see a sort of model in here possibly, or at least a start of one? No? Okay, so that'll come with experience. I suggest you try it, and if you don't have it, and you have an interview or a subsequent meeting, start sketching it, because you want an outline. You don't try to get complete, but just like, what are the major levers and how are they related? But I know this model is going to have to do with segments and growth in those segments and our access to them, access to the segments. For example, I could have 5 or 6 segments, a consumer, small business, some different geographies. Those might be my segments, and they have some growth rates. And then how I do the investment changes the growth rates of those. That would be a very simple model. All right? And then we have commitment. So what's the view on commitment? Well, I know who the decision makers are. And notice that they're coalitions, right? I've got a pretty good view of that, and I know that if I can convince them, a lot of this is going to move forward. I know there are people who can take action in his teams. Teams are passionate and ready to go. And if I can help him get to a place where they say, look, we've looked at all these things, and this one is the best, and I can get these people to intuitively understand it, and I can get these people to think it's a good use of money, I'm pretty sure they can run. So that's my quick run through decision quality. And that's probably how I'd tackle this, at least for a first round. What questions or comments do you have?
We have just a couple minutes left, so if you want to, you just opened it for questions. So
yeah,
please.
Yeah, Andrew.
So this was very doable when we had 5 minutes after each blurb from Udi to unpack those statements.
Yeah.
When you were starting as a decision analyst, what techniques did you do to help you think faster on your feet?
That's a great question. So I think my biggest gap was around the electricity. And I didn't seek it very well or understand how to talk about it or pick up on it. That was probably what I've learned the most since coming here. I think that trying it, the doing of it, is really, really helpful. It drives a lot of stuff out. So if you can get in a conversation, get enough, for me, it's just like, okay, what are the options? Here's a little decision tree. What if I wired it up this way? I'm a very much, the learn by doing method has been incredibly useful for me. And you show it to the guy and you get immediate feedback. You could sort of see a little bit, this isn't a good illustration of decision, but when I drew this picture, did you see how he interacted with it to correct it? That's the relationship I want to have with a model in a kind of thing. So you need to get some background understanding, figure out where this electricity is, but I would just start doing it. What are your alternatives? You don't have to draw decision trees. You might, if it's helpful, but okay, here you go. Some open-ended questions like, what are your issues? Are really good. Another good question, that's an opening sort of question. Another question is something like, what's the most important? So you limit That's a very common pattern, is to say, okay, well, I illustrated over here, right? I was saying, look, he's got 6 things here. If I wanted to learn more about this, I would ask him which 3 or 2 give me the most interesting kind of variation. So that limiting forces him to get to what's important. And by picking contrast, I learn a lot, right? So those are some of the things that I've done. Yeah?
Okay, I think we're at time now.
All right, well, let me ask Udi how he feels about this. Are we... You ready
better.
to,
We
you
need
ready
to continue to talk.
give me a PO? All right.
So with that, I'd like to invite you all to thank Udi and Dave.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
If anyone wants to keep a copy, you're welcome. If not, then I'll collect these so we don't have trash, you know.
What is the name?
It's Mag Cloud. It's there are a couple MAGCLOUD. Mag Cloud, one word, like magazine, cloud.
Yeah, I put in Mac Cloud. It didn't.
No.
Very nice.